promise in the heart of Chennai, India, nestled within the bustling neighborhood of Ashok Nagar, stood a modest two-room apartment. This was the home of the Pichai family, a sanctuary of dreams, discipline, and determination. The apartment, though small, was filled with warmth and the aroma of South Indian spices, a testament to Lakshmi Pichai's culinary skills. Lakshmi, a former stenographer turned homemaker, managed the household with grace and efficiency, ensuring that her family was well cared for despite their limited means. Raghunatha Pichai, the patriarch, was an electrical engineer at the British conglomerate Gex. His work involved managing a factory that produced electrical components, a job that demanded precision and dedication. Raghunatha's passion for technology was evident in the way he spoke about circuits and machinery, often sharing stories of his work with his sons during dinner. He believed in the transformative power of education and was determined to provide his children with opportunities he never had. Indian frontliners, +1 Scribd, +1 Sundar, the elder son, was a quiet and observant child. He possessed an uncanny ability to remember numbers, especially telephone numbers, which fascinated his family and friends. This talent hinted at a mind wired for patterns and sequences. Sundar's curiosity was insatiable. He would often dismantle household gadgets to understand their workings, much to his mother's chagrin. Yet his father encouraged this inquisitiveness, seeing in it the spark of innovation. The family's financial situation was modest. They didn't own a car or a television, and there were times when running water was a luxury. However, these constraints never dampened the family's spirit. Raghunatha and Lakshmi instilled in their children the values of humility, resilience, and kindness. They taught them to find joy in simple pleasures and to face challenges with courage. Business today, education was paramount in the Pichai household. Sundar attended Jawahar Vidyalaya Senior Secondary School and later, Vanavani School at IIT Madras. He excelled academically, particularly in mathematics and science, subjects that captivated his analytical mind. His teachers recognized his potential and often spoke of his disciplined approach to learning. Sundar's dedication earned him a place at the prestigious Indian Institute of Technology Kharagpur, where he pursued a degree in metallurgical engineering. Money Control +2 Business, Today +2 Wikipedia +2 IIT Kharagpur. Sundar's world expanded. He was exposed to advanced concepts and cutting-edge research, which fueled his ambition. He also met Anjali, a fellow student who would later become his wife. Their shared values and mutual respect laid the foundation for a lifelong partnership. Upon graduation, Sundar was offered a scholarship to study materials, science, and engineering at Stanford University. The opportunity was a dream come true, but it came with a hefty price tag. The cost of the flight to the United States alone was more than Raghunatha's annual salary. Without hesitation, Raghunatha withdrew his savings and took out a loan to fund his son's journey, a testament to his unwavering belief in Sundar's potential. Scribd Sundar's departure was a poignant moment for the family. As he boarded the plane, he carried with him not just his belongings but also the hopes and sacrifices of his parents. He was acutely aware of the responsibility that came with their investment in his future. In the United States, Sundar faced a new set of challenges. The cultural differences, academic rigor, and homesickness tested his resilience. Yet, he persevered, drawing strength from the values instilled in him by his parents. He completed his master's degree at Stanford and later earned an MBA from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. Learn Loner +A5 YouTube Plum5 JFW Online +5 Enter Pre-Next Product Plan +3 Encyclopedia Britannica 3 Wikipedia +3 Sundar's professional journey began at Applied Materials, followed by a stint at McKinsey & Company. In 2004, he joined Google, where his innovative thinking and leadership skills propelled him through the ranks. He played a pivotal role in developing products like Google Chrome, Gmail, and Google Maps, eventually becoming the CEO of Google and its parent company, Alphabet Inc. at Encyclopedia Britannica +4 Scribd +4 Wikipedia +4. Despite his meteoric rise, Sundar remained grounded. He often spoke about his humble beginnings and the sacrifices his parents made. Their story was a constant reminder of the importance of humility, resilience, and kindness. Years later, Raghunatha reached out to his son with a request that would test Sundar's values and commitment to his roots. What Sundar did next left everyone speechless. The letter. It had been a rainy evening in Palo Alto when Sundar returned home late from work. The house was quiet, lit softly by a single lamp in the corner of the living room. The air still carried the scent of Anjali's cooking, though she had already gone to bed. The weight of his responsibilities at Google pressed heavy on his shoulders, as they had every day for years now. Decisions worth billions rested on his judgment. His time was divided between product development, board meetings, and strategy calls with people across the globe. But on this night, something else awaited him, something far removed from the glass towers and conference calls. On the table was a white envelope, thin and slightly creased, with familiar handwriting on the front. It was his father's. Raghunatha rarely wrote letters anymore. Emails had long replaced paper, and even then most messages from home were simple updates. Your uncle is visiting, or your mother made dosa, we missed you. This letter felt different. There was something in the way it was placed, something in its stillness. Sundar sat down and opened it slowly. The paper crackled under his fingers, fragile and slightly yellowed at the edges. Inside, in Tamil, were his father's words, written in careful, deliberate strokes. The letter began with warmth, speaking of home, of familiar things. A new, flowering plant his mother had planted, the neighbor's son who got married, the monsoon rains flooding the street again. But halfway through, the tone shifted. Raghunatha's words grew uncertain, almost hesitant. He wrote about a problem. An old friend, Murugan, was in trouble. Murugan had been more than just a friend. He was family in every way that counted. They had grown up together in Madurai, worked together at Guess for years, and stood by each other through life's struggles. Now Murugan's business had collapsed, leaving him with debts he couldn't repay. He was at risk of losing his home. Raghunatha didn't ask for money. He never had, not once. Instead, he asked Sundar if there was anything he could do to help Murugan find a second chance. A job, a connection, a small opportunity, anything. I know you're busy, the letter said, but if you could just meet him once, listen to him. He's a good man. He just needs someone to believe in him again. Sundar read the letter twice, maybe 3 times. It wasn't the request that shook him. It was the way it was written. His father, the proudest man he knew, had humbled himself to ask for help, not for himself but for someone else, and behind every word was the weight of their history. The nights Raghunatha had stayed up late repairing a broken transistor, the day he sold his only scooter to pay for Sundar's flight to America, the look in his eyes when he waved goodbye at the airport. Not knowing if he'd ever see his son again, Sundar folded the letter and stared at it for a long time. The success he had built in America, the titles, the accolades, the respect, it all felt distant now. What mattered most in this quiet moment was the voice of a father asking his son not for money but for compassion. The next day, Sundar cleared a slot in his calendar. It wasn't easy. Google's schedule ran months ahead, booked down to the minute. But he insisted. He had his team reach out discreetly, and within a week, Murugan was flown from Chennai to California, his visa arranged quietly by the company's legal department. Murugan was an older man now. The years had taken their toll. His eyes were tired, his voice quieter than Sundar remembered from his childhood visits. He wore the same kind of simple white shirt and vesti he had always worn, unchanged by time. He sat nervously in Sundar's office, surrounded by glass walls, sleek furniture, and teams of young engineers walking briskly outside the door. They talked for an hour. Murugan spoke of his shop, of how it thrived for years selling radios and small appliances, and how it all fell apart when bigger chains moved in. He spoke with quiet dignity, never asking for pity, never blaming anyone. Sundar listened, not as a CEO, but as a boy from Chennai whose life had once intersected with this man's. And by the end of their conversation, Sundar made a decision. He reached out to one of Google's outreach partners in India and arranged for Murugan to be trained in managing digital tools for small businesses. More importantly, he helped Murugan set up a digital storefront, an initiative that was quietly funded through a program Sundar himself had once suggested. Within months, Murugan was able to restart a version of his business, reaching customers, not just in Chennai but across southern India. But it didn't stop there. The conversation with Murugan ignited something in Sundar, a memory, a feeling, a sense of responsibility. For years he had spoken about building tools for the next billion users, about connecting rural India to the internet, but now the mission had a face: Murugan's. Soon after, Sundar launched a new initiative through Google India, aimed at helping traditional businesses embrace digital transformation. It wasn't just about tech, it was about dignity, about giving people like Murugan a chance to rebuild, to reimagine their futures with pride. Back in Chennai, Raghunatha received another letter, this one typed. It was from Murugan. It simply said, "Your son did not forget us. Thank you for raising him the way you did." Sundar never told anyone at the company about the true reason behind the initiative. To them, it was part of a broader strategy, part of a vision for emerging markets. But in his heart, Sundar knew it was something more personal, more sacred. And just when Sundar thought he had repaid the debt of gratitude to his family, a call came late one night from Chennai. A whisper over the line. "Appa is not well." The return. The phone call came just after midnight. Sundar had been reviewing a product launch roadmap, surrounded by data sheets and presentation slides, his mind still tangled in timelines and feedback loops, when Anjali entered the room holding his phone. Her eyes said more than her lips ever needed to. She didn't speak, just handed him the phone gently, as if afraid the weight of it might break the air around them. On the other end was his cousin Ravi, his voice trembling. "Appa fainted. He's stable now, but the doctors think it's his heart," they said. It was close. In that moment, time stilled. The walls of his office, the hum of the heater, even the glowing screen before him, they all faded. Only the echo of that word remained. Close. Too close. By the time the sun rose in California, Sundar was on a flight to Chennai. Not as a CEO, not as a leader of one of the most powerful companies on earth, but as a son. A worried, guilt-stricken son. The flight was long and silent. As the plane cut across oceans, Sundar's mind replayed memories in a loop. The first time he rode behind his father on that battered scooter. The late-night science talks in the dark during power cuts. The way his father used to sit quietly at the window after long shifts at the factory, sipping tea and staring into the street like he was reading the future in shadows. He had left home to chase a dream, and now that dream was calling him back, not with applause, but with fear. When he arrived in Chennai, the familiar humidity wrapped around him like an old blanket. The city hadn't changed much, but he had. Cars were sleeker, streets more crowded, but the small tea stall at the corner of Ashok Nagar was still there. He passed it in silence, wondering if the man behind the counter still remembered him. The apartment was quieter than he remembered. As he stepped inside, the creak of the door seemed louder than usual. His mother stood waiting, thinner now, older, but her eyes lit up with something stronger than joy. Relief. His father lay in the small bedroom, his chest rising slowly under the thin cotton sheet. Tubes and monitors beeped softly, signs of life holding on by threads of science and grace. Raghunatha opened his eyes when Sundar approached, and a slow smile spread across his face. "You came?" he whispered, his voice dry and cracked. "Of course, Appa," Sundar said, sitting down beside him, taking his hand. "I should have come sooner." Raghunatha shook his head weakly. "You came when it mattered." For hours they spoke softly, about everything and nothing. His father asked, about work, about new inventions, about Anjali and the children. But more than anything, he just wanted Sundar near. There was a peace in his presence, like a loop finally closing after years of being left open. Later that night, Sundar stepped out onto the narrow balcony where he had once stood as a boy, gazing at stars between tangled electrical wires. The city below pulsed with life, but his thoughts drifted inward. He remembered how Raghunatha had once repaired an old radio just so Sundar could listen to science broadcasts from around the world. He remembered how during his final year of engineering, they had to choose between buying a new pair of shoes for him or paying an extra electricity bill. And his father chose shoes. And now here they were, full circle. The man who had built Sundar's future was lying in a hospital bed, and for the first time Sundar felt the limits of his own power. There were no algorithms to fix a heart, no code to rewrite time. The following day the doctors ran more tests. The prognosis was not immediate danger, but it was serious. Raghunatha needed rest. His heart had been under strain for years. They suggested a bypass, not urgent but necessary. Sundar offered to fly his father to the best hospital in California to arrange the finest care money could buy. Raghunatha, ever the humble man, simply said, "If the doctors here can do it, let them. I want to recover in my own home, near your mother, near the streets I know." Sundar respected his decision, but he didn't stop there. Within days, he arranged for specialists from abroad to consult remotely with the doctors in Chennai. He made sure the hospital had the latest equipment, funding what was needed without drawing attention to himself. Quietly, without fanfare. And, while his father rested, Sundar did something unexpected. He took a walk through his old neighborhood, not with a camera crew or security, but alone. He visited his school, spoke to a few of the teachers still there. He sat on a bench where he used to eat his lunch, watching children run across the dusty playground. They didn't recognize him, and he preferred it that way. Later, he stopped by Murugan's new shop, a sleek modern corner stall with a glowing sign and a digital payment counter. The same man who had once wept silently in Sundar's office now smiled brightly, standing tall behind his counter. "Your father told me you might stop by," Murugan said. "He said you needed to remember who you were." Sundar nodded, feeling the truth in those words. He had become a man of the world, but his story had roots buried deep in this soil. And now, as his father lay recovering, he realized something profound. His greatest success was not becoming CEO. It was never forgetting where he came from. But just as things seemed to settle, a quiet storm began to rise. That night, as the family sat down for dinner, Raghunatha looked at Sundar with a strange intensity. "There's something you don't know," he said, his voice stronger now. "About your past. About how everything really began." Sundar stared at him, the spoon halfway to his mouth. "What do you mean?" he asked. His father paused. The room fell silent. "You weren't supposed to study engineering," he said softly. "There was a letter. One that never reached you, and it changed everything." The lost letter, the room once humming with the quiet sounds of plates clinking and spoons stirring, went still. Sundar sat frozen, staring across the table at his father. He could hear the soft ticking of the wall clock, the hum of the ceiling fan, and the distant honk of a scooter somewhere on the street. But inside everything felt suspended, like the moment before a monsoon breaks the silence of a summer night. "A letter?" Sundar asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Raghunatha didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a slow breath, his thin fingers tracing the edge of the steel tumbler on the table, as if grounding himself in the present before opening the door to a long-buried past. "You remember your final year at IIT?" he began. "You were applying to Stanford. The forms were long, complicated. I helped you with the documents, remember?" Sundar nodded. He remembered those days vividly, staying up all night to fine-tune his statement of purpose, revising his project, reports, running to internet cafes just to check if emails had arrived. Every detail had mattered. Every deadline had felt like a cliff. "What you didn't know," his father continued, "was that you had received another letter before that, an offer." Sundar's eyebrows furrowed. "From who?" "From a university in India," his father said. "They wanted you for a fully funded program in artificial intelligence. Back then, AI was just beginning. It wasn't as well known as it is now. But they saw something in your early work, something others missed. They offered mentorship, a stipend, everything. The letter came by post. Sundar was stunned. Why didn't I ever see it? Raghunatha looked down at his hands. His voice turned quieter. I opened it by accident. Thought it was a bank statement. When I read it, I panicked. Why? Sundar asked, though a strange part of him already understood. Because I saw what it meant. If you accepted that offer, you wouldn't go to Stanford. You'd stay here. You'd live a life close to us. Comfortable, yes. Safe, maybe. But I knew you wanted more. I had heard you talk about Silicon Valley, about how everything new began there. And I knew I couldn't give you that future. Only that dream could. There was a long pause. Sundar felt the weight of the moment crash over him like a wave. All these years he had believed his path had been forged by chance, by determination, by the right doors opening at the right time. And now he was learning that one door, one very different future, had been quietly closed by the very hands that raised him. So you hid it, Sundar said. His father nodded. I tore it up, never told you. And a week later, your acceptance from Stanford came. It was like the world made the decision for you. But I made it first. The room fell silent again. Anjali, who had been listening from the corner, looked at Sundar carefully, unsure of how he would react. He stood up and walked slowly to the window. Outside, the night stretched endlessly. Chennai bathed in a golden haze, its chaos quieted for now. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he turned around. I don't know what to feel, he said honestly. Angry? Grateful? Both? His father met his eyes unblinking. You can feel both, son. You have every right to. And he did. Part of him felt betrayed. His freedom to choose had been taken from him. But another part, deeper and steadier, saw the sacrifice, the fear, the love behind that act. His father had gambled everything, not on what Sundar wanted, but on what he needed, even when Sundar himself didn't know it yet. I did it because I believed in you, his father said, his voice cracking. I knew the world needed you, not just us. Sundar crossed the room and sat back down beside him. He didn't say anything. Instead, he reached for his father's hand and held it, firm and steady. No words were needed now. Some truths don't resolve with language. They settle with silence, with presence. Later that night, Sundar couldn't sleep. The house was quiet again, the way it had been when he was a boy, staying up to study while everyone else slept. He stepped out into the hallway, past the closed bedroom doors, and sat down in the very spot where he used to read by the dim bulb on the wall. He pulled out his laptop, not to work, not to answer emails, but to write. Not a statement for the media or a keynote draft, but something personal. He began writing about the letter, about the quiet decision his father had made, about the power of sacrifice wrapped not in grandeur, but in everyday courage. He wrote about how the strongest people are often the ones who never ask to be seen. By sunrise, he had finished. He didn't know what he would do with the words yet, whether he would share them or keep them private. But he knew one thing. His life had not been built alone. It had been shaped gently but firmly by people like his father, men who bent their own destinies to ensure others could fly. But as the first rays of morning light spilled into the apartment, illuminating old photographs on the wall and cracked tiles on the floor, Sundar's phone buzzed once more. This time, it wasn't about his father. It was from his office. A data breach. Internal. Deliberate. And his name was being dragged into it. The fire inside the glass. The phone screen glowed dimly, in the fading light of the apartment, casting a soft, cold reflection on Sundar's face. He sat alone on the floor of the hallway. The same hallway where he had studied for exams as a boy, where dreams had once formed silently in the dark. Now, decades later, those dreams stood at risk of being shattered, not by fate, but by betrayal. The message was brief. It came from his chief of security. We need to talk. Possible internal leak. You've been named. There was no elaboration, just those words. Sundar read it again, and again, For a man whose career had been built on calm decision-making, sudden storms didn't usually rattle him. But this wasn't just a business problem. This was personal, because the moment he read the message, he knew. Someone had intentionally pulled him into something darker, something meant to unravel not just his career, but his character. He stood up slowly, almost mechanically, and walked to the tiny kitchen, where his mother had just begun brewing tea. She turned and smiled at him. "You're not sleeping again?" she asked, gently. He tried to smile back. "Just work things, Amma." She nodded, handing him a cup without question. She didn't ask for details. She never had to. All his life she had sensed things before he said them. Sundar stepped out to the balcony again, the warm cup in his hands, the night air brushing his skin. The city stretched before him, unaware of the weight in his chest. And somewhere in that moment, the CEO in him awoke. Within an hour, he had arranged a secure video call with his team. The screen flickered to life, faces appearing one by one. His legal head, the security lead, 2 senior executives. The tension in the digital room was immediate, unspoken. "We've isolated the breach," said Priya, his security lead. "Someone accessed internal server logs and leaked selective portions to a journalist. Metadata shows it was done using a credential tied to your profile." The words hit like a punch to the chest. "Mine?" Sundar asked, not with panic but a cold clarity. "Yes. But we know it wasn't you," she said. "The access happened during your flight to Chennai. Your credentials were cloned." "What did they leak?" Priya hesitated. "Emails. Selective ones. They're trying to paint you as having funneled money to a personal cause. Some are twisting the Digital India outreach to look like a cover for personal favors. Murugan's name is in one of them." The betrayal stung like salt in an open wound. He had helped Murugan out of compassion and duty, never for recognition. But now that kindness was being weaponized. His legal advisor spoke next. "The media hasn't published yet, but there are whispers, and the board will demand answers." Sundar nodded slowly. "Then we give them answers, all of them. Full transparency." "You could wait," someone suggested. "Let legal manage the optics." "No," he said firmly. "We tell the truth, and I do it myself." His team stared, unsure. Sundar leaned forward. "If we hide behind silence now, the narrative writes itself. I will not let my father's name be pulled through this. Not after everything he gave." The call ended in silence. But the fire had been lit. The next morning, Sundar sat down in his childhood room, now converted into a guest room, and drafted a statement. Not a legal defense, not a polished PR piece, but a letter, from one human to another. He wrote about growing up with nothing, about being taught that help is not a transaction, but a duty. About Murugan, and how he was a reflection of countless others across India who had been left behind by the digital age. He wrote about how, even at the top of the world, a man is still his father's son. The statement ended with a line that would later be quoted in newsrooms and boardrooms around the world. "If kindness becomes controversy, then perhaps we are asking the wrong questions." He posted it himself. No filters. No edits. Within hours, the story exploded. Some headlines were cruel, accusations wrapped in uncertainty. Others were supportive, hailing his transparency. His inbox flooded. News channels replayed sound bites. Commentators speculated endlessly. But beneath the noise, something unexpected happened. People began to come forward. Small business owners from India who had benefited from Google's outreach posted videos. Employees shared stories of his integrity. Even former critics acknowledged the rarity of such honesty from a global leader. And then came the twist. 3 days later, Priya called again. "We found the source." "Who?" Sundar asked, bracing. "Himself. An insider. A junior analyst on the product finance team. They were approached by a rival firm, promised a job in exchange for leaking sensitive data." "And they chose to impersonate me?" Sundar asked. "Yes. Because your access gave weight to the story, made it sensational." He closed his eyes. It made sense in a horrible, perfect way. Use the name of a respected leader, tie it to money, add a noble cause. It was the perfect recipe for public distrust. What happens now? He asked. We're launching legal action, and the board wants to meet you, not for discipline. They want your leadership during the fallout. Sundar exhaled. Not from relief, but from understanding. This was no longer about survival. This was about rebuilding trust, not just externally, but within himself. He looked across the room at his father, who was now well enough to walk slowly to the balcony each morning. Raghunatha didn't know all the details, but he had sensed the storm. And like always, he had stood quiet, steady, waiting for Sundar to find his way. That night, as the city lights blinked like distant signals in the dark, Sundar sat beside his father and spoke. Appa, he said, do you ever regret tearing up that letter? His father looked at him with calm eyes. Not once, because the world didn't need another engineer. It needed you. Sundar smiled. Not because the pain had passed, but because the truth had found him again. But the story wasn't over. Because 2 days later, Anjali came to him holding a folder. This came in the mail, she said. Inside was a note, unsigned, and a photo of him, as a boy, standing in front of his school, and scrawled on the back in handwriting that froze his breath were the words, I knew you'd change the world, but I also knew the cost. He turned the photo over again, and something about it didn't make sense, because it was taken from an angle no one in his family could have taken it from. Someone had been watching him since the beginning. The watcher, the photo lay on the table, like a whisper from the past. Sundar stared at it for what felt like hours, his eyes locked on the edges, the shadows, the tiny details most people would miss, but that now screamed for attention. It showed him as a boy, barefoot, standing at the school gate in Chennai, a tattered backpack hanging loosely from one shoulder, the midday sun washing his frame in a soft, golden light. But what unsettled him was not the image itself. It was the angle. It had been taken from a distance. Not a casual family photo, not something a teacher might have snapped during a school function. No, this was candid, precise, almost deliberate. It had been taken by someone watching silently from across the street, someone who knew exactly what they were capturing. And on the back, in handwriting that bore no signature, were words that chilled him to the core. I knew you'd change the world, but I also knew the cost. Who had written this, and why now? Why send it just as his name was dragged through scandal, just as his father's secret had come to light, just as he was rediscovering who he truly was? Anjali stood beside him, her face pale with concern. Do you think it's a threat? I don't know, Sundar said, his voice low. But it's not just a message. It's a reminder. He scanned the photo again. Something about the background struck him. A blurred figure near a tree, half hidden in shadow, almost invisible at first glance. He enlarged the image digitally, enhanced the contrast, but the figure remained a mystery. Too little to identify, but too intentional to be random. Sundar's instincts, sharpened by years of leading product security teams, anticipating digital threats before they emerged, kicked in. This wasn't just about the photo. This was about the sender. Someone who had followed his journey for decades. Someone who had been close enough to see his roots but distant enough to remain invisible. He handed the image to his security lead, asking her to trace the origin. Within hours, they discovered it had been posted from a courier box on the outskirts of Delhi. No return address. Cash paid in advance. Whoever had sent it knew how to disappear. But then, an unexpected breakthrough came. Priya's team managed to pull a faint fingerprint off the envelope, and the results matched someone from a long-forgotten corner of Sundar's early life, a man named Pradeep. Pradeep was once his father's colleague at GEC. Quiet, reclusive, brilliant with circuits but poor with people. He had mentored Sundar, briefly during school, teaching him how to solder wires, how to understand the logic behind machines. But one day, he vanished. No goodbyes, no explanations. Sundar had asked his father once what happened to him, and Raghunatha had simply said, he lost his way. Now, 2 decades later, he was back. In shadow. Watching. Sundar dug through his memory, trying to piece together the fragments. He remembered Pradeep's fascination with early computing, his obsession with algorithms that predicted behavior. He remembered how Pradeep used to say, "The future isn't built, it's watched and then shaped." What if Pradeep had never stopped watching? With the help of investigators, Sundar traced Pradeep to a quiet tech consultancy in Hyderabad. It operated under a different name but specialized in behavioral data, predictive analytics, and digital persuasion, the kind of company that didn't exist on paper but had influence in places that mattered. When Sundar confronted him, the meeting was arranged in secret, at a neutral location. An abandoned factory near the outskirts of the city, once a place where wires were made, now rusted and forgotten. Pradeep arrived late, older now, with white in his beard and a limp in his step, but his eyes burned with the same fire. He greeted Sundar with a nod. "You made it," Pradeep said. "I wondered if you would." "Why now?" Sundar asked, skipping pleasantries. "Why the photo?" "Because your journey was never just yours," Pradeep replied. "You weren't the only one with potential, but you were the only one given the stage. I wanted to see what you'd do with it, whether you'd remember where you came from." "And?" Sundar asked. "You did," Pradeep said. "Mostly." Sundar's hands curled into fists. "So the breach? The leak? Was that you?" Pradeep tilted his head. "No, but I didn't stop it. I let it happen. I wanted to see how you'd respond when the world turned on you, whether you'd retreat into power or reach back into your past." Sundar stepped forward, anger rising. "You used my father, my story. You turned kindness into ammunition." "No," Pradeep said calmly. "I reminded you. You were becoming a figurehead, polished, protected. The world doesn't need another leader who forgets how it feels to fall. It needs one who remembers pain, who remembers sacrifice. I sent the photo to wake you up." For a moment, Sundar didn't respond. Part of him wanted to rage. Part of him wanted to understand. "So this was your test," he said bitterly. "You watched my life like a blueprint, like I was just another pattern in your algorithm." Pradeep's eyes softened. "Not a blueprint, Sundar. A mirror. And now that the world has seen you bleed, it will trust you more than ever." 2 weeks later, Sundar stood in front of the Google board. He didn't defend himself. He told the story. Every part of it. The photo, the letter, the breach, the betrayal, and the lesson he learned in the ashes. He spoke of Murugan, of his father, of the cost of forgetting your roots in pursuit of titles. And when he finished, the room was silent. One board member, an older woman who rarely spoke, leaned forward. "You understand," she said, "that after this people will no longer just see you as the CEO. They will see you as a symbol of humility, of truth. Are you ready for that?" Sundar nodded. "I don't want to be a symbol. I want to be a reminder that no matter how far we rise, the people who shaped us, the ones who sacrificed for us, deserve to be remembered and protected." They voted unanimously to keep him, not just as CEO, but to lead a new initiative, global in scope, human in purpose, designed to elevate voices from overlooked communities and ensure technology never forgets the hands that built the future. Back in Chennai, Raghunatha recovered slowly. Sundar returned to visit again, not because of crisis, but because of choice. They sat together on the same balcony sipping tea. "You know," Raghunatha said, "you're still that boy to me, the one who remembered every phone number, who asked too many questions. And you're still the man who gave me everything," Sundar said quietly. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun rise over the city that had shaped them, both. And though the world outside moved faster than ever, inside that small home, time moved gently. Because sometimes, the greatest journeys are the ones that lead us back to where we began.